Big Loud is a professor at Princeton and the chairman for the Center of African American Studies. Matt Welsh, the editor-at-large for Reason, a libertarian magazine. Also with us, MSNBC national security analyst and former chief of staff at the CIA and Department of Defense, Jeremy Bash. Jeremy, I'm going to start with you. Surprise, surprise, President Trump has taken to Twitter this morning, and I want to share a couple of his choice thoughts. Quote, General Flynn was given the highest security clearance by the Obama administration, but the fake news seldom likes to talk about that. President Trump, I hope you're watching. We're okay with talking about it. And in fact, the Obama administration fired General Flynn. Jeremy, is the president backing himself into a corner here?
Well, about 1.5 million people, Stephanie, have a top secret security clearance, so that's not unusual. And in fact, the Obama administration did let Flynn go over mismanagement of the Defense Intelligence Agency prior to that. But it was really the incoming team that vetted Flynn for the top job of National Security Advisor. And most tellingly, on December 29th, the very day that the president was imposing sanctions on Russia for their interference in the election, Flynn was having a phone call with the Russian ambassador. Now, when Sally Yates, who will testify today, went to Don McGahn on the 26th of January, she wasn't just saying, hey, here's a heads up about something that may be going on. She actually was informing the White House that there was a federal criminal and counterintelligence investigation, because before that, they did not know that. However, on the 24th of January, just a few days into the administration, the FBI interviewed Mike Flynn, and he misled them the same way he had misled the vice president. And so basically what she was saying to McGahn was, there's a criminal investigation, a counterintelligence investigation. We've talked to the National Security Advisor. He didn't tell the truth to us, and he didn't tell the truth to the vice president. Instead of firing Mike Flynn, they fired Sally Yates and kept Mike Flynn in the job for 17 days. Okay, well, Sally Yates then only technically worked for the administration for about 10 days. And it sounds like the White House is already trying to paint her as this Democratic operative. If she's got facts like this to back her up, what does that mean for the White House? I mean, she's not a Democratic operative. She came into the Justice Department as a career prosecutor in Georgia under the administration of President Bush 41. She served her entire career as a career federal prosecutor, rose to the job of United States Attorney in Georgia, then was Deputy Attorney General, oversaw the investigation of the Russia meddling since last summer, since the summer of 2016, and she was in an acting capacity as a holdover for the Trump administration. She was doing her job, Stephanie. She was telling people in the White House about an effort by a foreign power to meddle in our election and the possibility that somebody in the White House was talking to the Russians about that issue. You would think that the White House and the president and their senior team would be very concerned about this. All right, well, you would, but President Trump also tweeted this morning, ask Sally Yates under oath if she knows how classified information got into the newspapers soon after she explained it to the White House counsel. Will it be a plausible defense on Sally Yates's part if she says, I shared all of this information over and over with the White House and they did nothing. This was my only option. Will that argument hold any water?
Well, it should, but I'm not sure it actually will. And that is the sense that plausibility might not be the standard here. What we're hearing from President Trump is an effort to change the subject, right, to point our eyes in a different direction. And it raises suspicion, at least on my part. Why is he and the administration still defending Mike Flynn? Why is the president still, right, not forthcoming with regards to this particular issue when the evidence seems to be fairly clear? And so it just deepens suspicion on my part. And
well, Axios had put out that members of the White House wanted to try to distance themselves from this, and President Trump said, no way. It had been reported members of Trump's transition team were uncomfortable with some of Mike Flynn's activities, but President Trump continued to be comfortable. The day after Mike Flynn left his post, the president continued to blame the media, saying this is all just a hullabaloo created by the media. He didn't do anything. What does this do to the administration?
It's totally unclear. I mean, he's throwing Mike Flynn under the bus in one sense, saying, oh, he's an Obama guy, right? Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, Mike Flynn doesn't work for the administration right now, okay? And it's not a Mike Flynn. And
Obama fired him.
Of course, he fired him. And Mike Flynn around Washington was known as a weirdo. I mean, like, he was...
Technically speaking.
This is a classification, as you well know, in national security. And so the question always was, why was he even in the Trump transition team? Why was he in the national security apparatus? So Trump is both trying to kind of defend him and separate himself from him at the same time. I'm sure people around Donald Trump, including the people who run his foreign policy, national security right now are asking the same question that you are. They don't understand probably what Donald Trump is doing in terms of his approach with Michael Flynn.
Deep suspicion.
Yeah, and Stephanie, if I could just throw this out there, there's a larger issue, which is what leverage does the Russian Federation have over U.S. foreign policy? That's the big issue we care about. And it appears that in the early days, they did have some leverage by dealing with Flynn, because what Flynn was saying to them was, hey, those sanctions that are being imposed today, don't worry about it.
And those sanctions are crippling. Remember, Vladimir Putin may be a very, very wealthy man. The Russian economy is as crippled as it ever was. It's not like they are our peer in terms of economic equality.
Let me just clarify. The crippling sanctions you're talking about have been long-standing. But the sanctions I'm talking about are actually the sanctions that the Obama administration was imposing that day, December 29th, on the Russian intelligence agencies, kicking out 35 intelligence officers, sending them home, and closing 2 intelligence bases that the Russians maintained here. And Flynn basically said, don't worry about that. We're going to let you off the hook for your meddling.
I thought he was just calling to say Happy New Year. Talk about an artichoke dip
exactly,
recipe.
Sure.
But it's worth pointing out that as it stands right now, this is not a super Russia-friendly administration. I mean, the end result of all of this, and we talk about it, and it's interesting, and there's all kinds of weird smoke and people who are dissembling, but Trump administration is not lifting sanctions anytime soon. The people who
Well, they backed themselves into a corner. Can they at this
Today, when Sally Yates testifies, Russia will be back on the front page again.
Boom. All right, well, guess what else is on the front page? Healthcare. We got to talk about that. The House has done its job. Now it is the Senate's turn, preparing to take up this legislation. But even some Republicans are saying their bill is going to have very little to do with what has already been passed. Take a listen.
The Senate is starting from scratch. We're going to draft our own bill, and I'm convinced that we're going to take the time to do it right.
Meanwhile, you may not be surprised to learn that President Obama is weighing in to try to save his namesake legislation. He said opponents of the new bill have to show the same courage that the supporters of Obamacare showed back in 2010.
It is my fervent hope, and the hope of millions, that regardless of party, such courage is still possible.
NBC's Peter Alexander joins me now from the White House. Pedro, what will happen to the health care fight as it moves to the Senate? It's like a hot potato.
Whatever happens, we may be waiting for quite a while. Senators have already said they see no deadline here. They're going to work on their own timetable on this. But suffice to say, as you heard from the Republican from Maine, Susan Collins, saying there that basically they're starting over, trying to, in effect, to address some of those most controversial elements of the House Republicans' bill. The question then becomes, will they be able to reconcile what they do with what the House does whenever that does come to that point? There is a working group in the Senate right now, about 13 Republican senators, notably all of them are men. Lawmakers say they're not going to play the game of identity politics here, that they're focused on addressing all of these issues. But some of those issues include pre-existing conditions. The question of whether those individuals with pre-existing conditions will be covered in the same way that they were under Obamacare, whether the claims that Republicans are making actually hold water, the claim being that Americans will be getting better coverage at a cheaper price, something that many experts have pushed back on that suggestion right now. And the rolling back specifically of those essential health benefits as they exist right now. Already some left-leaning groups have been pushing back right now with new ads, Stephanie, now airing against 24 House Republicans who voted in favor of this bill. All of this as they are hearing it from their constituents back at home.
All right, I want to bring my panel back. Eddie and Matt, Peter laid it out, but there was Republicans over the weekend on the talk shows putting out statements that don't necessarily align with what we see in this legislation. Tom Price saying it's going to be more affordable for those with pre-existing conditions. Paul Ryan said no one is going to be hurt by the plan to cut $800 billion from Medicaid. And Mick Mulvaney said everyone's going to have better coverage than they did under Obamacare. If you are a member of the Senate right now, you've seen the bill that's been handed to you, you've listened to what these 3 senior members of the administration or our government have said, what do?
You laugh.
This is life or death. You laugh.
You observe that lying about large national health care bills is a bipartisan thing that everyone seems to do. The Senate is not going to take the House bill up. They're ripping it up as a matter of course. There's only a 4-seat majority among Republicans there. They don't have the swing voters on that 13-member panel, which is madness as far as I'm concerned. I see this whole thing as an attempt, you said hot potato, that's the right word. which Republican is going to be the one that wants to tell Donald Trump he's not going to get an Obamacare repeal and replace, which this really isn't, by the way, passed. There's going to be, the Freedom Caucus didn't want to be that person again. So a lot of people held their nose and passed something that they wouldn't actually want to see passed in the Freedom Caucus. Plenty of people. Go read Justin Amash's the description on Facebook of why he voted yes on it. It's not particularly convincing as a matter of policy. So who in the Senate is going to be the one to tell Donald Trump he's not going to get what he wants?
Eddie, repeal and replace, Republicans don't want to offer Obamacare. They don't want to offer the same thing, and maybe that's okay. President Trump won. Why not own it and say, these are my beliefs, this is what I think health care should look like? Instead, we're in this gray area. We've got Ruhle, Labrador, saying no one has ever died from not having access to health care. And now he qualified it later, saying, you know, he didn't say things eloquently or elegantly, and he tried to clean it up, but they're offering something different. Just own it.
So they're lying, and there's rampant hypocrisy, and then they're trying to do three things, as Nick Confessori said earlier, that aren't reconcilable. They're trying to repeal Obamacare, they're trying to give everybody coverage, and they're trying to make it cheaper. Right? Those things are irreconcilable. The only thing I know is $800 billion in Medicaid will be cut, and $600 billion of tax relief will be given to the rich. This is mean-spirited stuff. That's all it is. It's mean-spirited to the core.
Warren Buffett said it's only going to hook guys like him up. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. Mike Vaquera, Peter Alexander, Jeremy Bash, you two, Matt, Eddie, you're staying.